Play to Potential podcast.
Hello and welcome to the 15th conversation at the Play to Potential podcast series. I'm Raman, the creator and curator of this series of conversations. I'm an executive coach and I do work in the space of leadership development, but with a focus on enabling thoughtful transitions at the leadership level, both in the context of companies and careers. My objective from this podcast is to have learning conversations with a range of people and share those curated insights with you. This time, I'm excited to be talking to Vedika Bhandarkar. Vedika is an alumnus of IIM Ahmedabad and spent about a quarter of a century working in the financial services space across ICICI, JP Morgan and Credit Suisse. She's now the MD at water.org. That's a global organization that's committed to developing and delivering solutions to ensure people have safe water and sanitation. In our conversation, we spoke about a range of topics, including her thoughts around women and careers, transitioning at senior levels across companies, moving from the for-profit world to the social world, moving from an executive world to a non-exec world, and so on. Without further ado, over to the conversation. Vedika, thanks for your time. Excited to be talking to you.
Thank you for having me on your podcast. It's
Lovely.
A pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And maybe a good place to start, Vedika, is if you could talk a little bit about what you do today at water.org. What do you do there? What's the organization about? But also touch upon why do you do what you do? What got you here?
Sure. So water.org, as the name suggests, it's a not-for-profit. And we are focused on making sure that every person in this world gets access to safe water and sanitation. So our vision is that in our lifetimes, everybody in this world will have access to safe water and sanitation. Our focus is really households at the base of the economic pyramid. We are a 25-year-old organization, and when we started like any other philanthropic organization, which is giving money to people to build, either to dig wells or to get water connections. Very soon realized that there isn't enough money in the world to solve this problem. So to give you a sense of the gap which exists. So World Bank estimates that you need $1 trillion over 5 years to ensure that everybody in this world gets access to safe water and sanitation. If you look at the amount of money which is spent in this sector per year in terms of aid, in terms of philanthropy, the money is about $10 billion. Wow. So there's a huge gap, and it certainly is not possible in our lifetime, right? So then this started this thinking process of how can we make sure that every rupee or every dollar is leveraged to the maximum.
Sure.
The second realization was that people at the base of the economic pyramid, which is who we serve, are already paying a lot to get access to the services. So, everybody needs water, right? And so even if there is no water connection, people are getting that water and they are paying the water vendors, or they're paying through some other means a huge cost, and they're borrowing at 50%, 100%. And that's how, and the third realization was most of the people at the base of the pyramid want a choice in what services they have and are happy to pay as long as it's affordable. So that's what started what we call water credit. It started in India many years ago. It's a very simple concept, which was really working with financial institutions, which would make loans for small loans, micro loans, for getting a water connection or for building a toilet. And so we started water credit in India several years ago. We had to really work hard to convince institutions that this will work. But the good news is it works. It is still very much our main offering in India, and we've exported it to many other countries. So to give you a sense of the numbers, in India, through water credit, our partners have made more than 1 million loans, reaching more than 4 million people, aggregating 1,200 crores. And remember I told you we want to make sure the leverage is the maximum, right? So we offer our partners some help at the beginning to get them to start water and sanitation lending. The help can be just technical help, or it can be some sort of soft subsidy to cover some of the initial costs. So the initial costs of surveying the market, the initial costs of demand generation, of hiring people, whatever it might be. And after that, the scale sort of takes over. And over time, our partners will not need any subsidy. So to get to this 1,200 crores of lending, our total grants to them have been 50 crores. So that's a 1:20 sort of leverage.
Interesting.
And overall, across the world, we've reached more than 6 million people through water credit. So that's been our main offering, but there are a bunch of other things which we do. So while we were working with lenders, we said, how else can we, encourage you? How can we facilitate you doing more lending? So a couple of things came up. One was they said, look, if we had access to capital on a consistent basis, we could do more of this lending. So we did two things. We worked a lot with the Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation and with RBI. And last year got water and sanitation included in the priority sector. So which means a bank, for it to make loans in this sector, is included in the priority, right? So our partners have more access to capital, but we didn't stop there. We went and raised a small fund from social impact investors, $11 million. We deployed it only in India as rupee-denominated debt last year. And now we're in the process of raising a bigger fund, $50 million. And the thesis really is, one, our partners will have more capital, which they can use to make more water and sanitation loans. But also, the social impact world has always thought that water and sanitation is not a sector which is bankable. They've thought that water and sanitation is only for philanthropy. So we are hoping to prove through our evidence base that this is a bankable sector so that more money can come into this sector. And I didn't talk about this. So, the million loans which have been made in India, the repayment rate has been 99% plus. And the average loan size, and which it took me many months to get over that fact, but the average loan size is just over 10,000 rupees. So, and the reason it took me so many months to get over this fact is, one, it's so small. But two, it makes such a huge difference in the lives of the people who have access to either that water connection and or the toilet.
And what's the key insight there when you talk about 99%? What are the reasons underpinning that high number?
So, that's a good question, and it's very surprising. So the first most basic insight is that the base of the economic pyramid is a bankable consumer base. But, MFIs recognize that, small finance banks recognize that, many banks now recognize that. So, but that is, I think, the most fundamental insight which we have to keep in mind. The second one, which I think takes even lenders by surprise, so a loan for a water connection or a loan for a toilet is not an income generating loan, right? It can be even called a consumption loan. Though I have a big problem with that, but it can be called a consumption loan. And the good news is, even though it's not an income generating loan, people still are paying back their loans. And I think that is the most fundamental insight. So the borrower recognizes the value of either the water tap at home. She saves so many hours every day where she doesn't have to go to fetch water, or she recognizes that having a toilet at home gives her safety, gives her daughter the safety, also reduces illnesses. So I think that recognition, and very often sitting in cities we make the mistakes that people at the base of the pyramid don't know what's good for them. Actually, it's not true at all. They absolutely know what's good for them. And look at the numbers. They speak for themselves. And, the good news today is we built such a strong evidence base within India that to get a new financial institution as a partner, it's relatively easy now because we can point to those numbers.
Sure.
And one of the new partners who we got in, actually what we did was help the risk committee get over their fear that these loans, it's not going to be viable lending. And we said, look at the data across states, across cycles, including the 2010 crisis, and these loans have been repaid.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And even by a for-profit metric, you're saying it makes commercial sense to serve this sector, is the point you're making. Right?
Absolutely. So what gets my goat is when I go to a new lender and they'll say, okay, we'll introduce you to CSR department. Yes, sure, I would love to get introduced to the CSR department. But the point which we are trying to make, and we are hoping it gets made every day, is lending for water and sanitation is a commercially viable business.
Got it.
And it's not something you do out of charity. In fact, at a recent partners meeting, one of our partners said something which I thought was very unusual and I had never thought of it. They said they do water and sanitation lending in order to preserve and protect their lending portfolio. And this is how they thought about it. They said the biggest risk when you're lending at the base of the pyramid is that the borrower will go back into poverty, right? And the reason they go back into poverty most of the times is because of a health shock. And if you can do any lending which we can reduce the chances of getting those health shocks, and sanitation and access to water does that, you actually improve the quality of your portfolio.
It's almost like an insurance product at some level, right?
Absolutely.
It's a health insurance product.
I know, and that is very unusual way of thinking, but it's very powerful if you think about it. Yeah,
very true. And given water, as you said, is sort of core for a lot of things we do. I mean, two things, right? One is sort of the insurance piece, and second is the piece around hidden costs of what it takes to find an alternative supply, what it means in terms of lost time, mobility, cash flows. So I think that piece around hidden costs, sometimes we living in urban cities probably don't appreciate enough.
Yeah, actually even in cities, in slums, people have that. So we call it the coping cost, right? So you're absolutely right. The number of hours spent going to and fro collecting water, the fact that many girls can't go to school because they have to be collecting water.
Plus the inflated costs you pay to collect the water, I would think that's a factor as well, right?
Yes, the cost which you pay to the vendors, plus the all sorts of health problems, again, which impacts everybody, but certainly the women and the girl child, because to relieve themselves, they have to wait till it's dark. They cannot relieve themselves as and when. It's not safe. So the costs, the coping costs are just enormous.
True. And just maybe given we're on the topic, Vedika, what's a good way for somebody who wants to contribute to this to engage? One is, of course, the financial institutions, clearly you talk to them, but is there a way the retail consumer or individual can make a difference to this cause through this platform?
Through the water.org platform? So absolutely, you can be involved. And I think the first step which anybody can take and should take is just to contribute financially. Every not-for-profit needs money to do their work. And so the easiest thing you can do is to write a check, and all checks are welcome. After that, I think if you are interested in the sector, if you believe that water and sanitation is a very fundamental need, then there are other ways of contributing, and by all means, go and visit our website, see what other areas you would like to contribute in, because a lot of effort is also needed around behavior change, around communication, around engagement with the communities. So, absolutely write to us and we'll be very happy. Yeah.
Sure. Got it. Maybe a good time to go back in time, Vedika, rewinding the clock.
Sure.
I'd love to, one of the pieces I'm curious about is how we get formed as people through our growing up years. Again, as you think about your childhood leading up to IMA, three or four themes that come up which played a key role in shaping Vedika of today. And maybe if I had to underscore the point, given the commentary that we have around women leadership, I'd be curious about any themes that specifically that you reflect upon which made a significant difference.
I was thinking about this and I don't think I have a clear-cut answer. So I grew up in a small town called Udaipur. My parents were both academics. They used to work in the university. And we were a very normal household. I think, and since you asked me to think about it, I have been thinking about it. And I think there were 2 or 3 things which I could come up with. We were a very relaxed household. There wasn't any pressure put on you. At the same time, you were really expected to do whatever you were doing really well. So you were expected to put all your effort into whatever you were doing. So there was certainly no pressure to, be first in your class or to win every medal or anything. But there was an expectation and that did you try your best? And that was important. And I think that sort of has stayed with me. And it's important for me. And hopefully we've been able to pass it to our kids, that you have to give everything that you do. You have to give it your all. You have to try your utmost. The second thing was there was no pressure in terms of this is what you should do. So as I said, my parents were both academics. They were both physicists. But there was certainly no expectation that I needed to do physics. Most of my classmates are doctors. So they studied biology in school and they became doctors. I did not like biology at all. And so there was no pressure from my parents that you have to do biology, you have to become a doctor. I did math, appeared for IIT, did not get in. Again, there was no pressure that you need to try it again next year, or you need to go to any of the other engineering colleges. So I did my science. And then through research, through a couple of talks which I attended with my dad, I decided to do my MBA. This was the first time anybody in the family was doing an MBA. My parents had no idea what this was all about, but they were incredibly supportive. So I think this no pressure to go on the expected paths has also stayed with me. And I think the third thing which has stayed with me is just open conversations. So we were, as a family, we could talk about anything. And you could have very strong disagreements with your parents, and I had many of them. And no subject was taboo. And, we believed in open conversations. It was a little messy, sometimes a little loud, but that's the way we grew up. And that's also stayed with me through my working career, that whenever things have been uncomfortable or I've disagreed with them, I've had open conversations. And at that time, it feels like, oh my God, what are you doing? But on hindsight, I think that's really worked well for me. So those would be the 3 things, if I had to say, which have stood with me.
Fair enough. And I think it's an interesting point you make about facilitating the child to figure out what makes sense for him or her. And second is sort of also, in McKinsey, we used to use the term obligation to dissent, where on a matter, let's say in a problem-solving discussion, somebody 20 years in the firm and somebody 2 months in the firm would be expected to treat each other as peers, right? And that sort of sets a certain culture, whether it's the house or whether it's an organization.
Correct. It's very hard in an organization.
Right.
It's hard to do it when you're the 2-month-old.
Right.
And it's very hard to take it when you've spent 20 years in the organization.
Right.
But if you can do it, I think it's incredibly powerful.
And I think maybe since I have 2 young kids, the parallel in a home context is when you're time-strapped, the tendency is often to kill the discussion. And you say,
correct. No, this is what it is.
Take this and run with this. And
the
harder part is often to say, okay, let's listen, let's talk, let's debate it out. So I guess at some level it gets hard at the home front as well. But I think...
Absolutely.
I hear you.
Absolutely.
If this topic is of interest, you might be interested in my recent conversation with Sinha, who was the founding dean of ISB and has been instrumental in setting up Ashoka University. He was a director at McKinsey and does a lot of work in the leadership space. When I asked him the question about how people should think about choosing a direction in the context of the leadership of the future, he said something similar. He spoke about how letting the child make the choice is almost as important or possibly more important than just the specific choice the child makes. The link between education and careers is possibly getting more and more tenuous with the passage of time.
The process of going through having to make a choice is a very big part of education and mindset in terms of risk-taking and pushing thinking and really identifying what are you passionate about.
Right.
And I, for a long time now, I've believed that unless you are happy doing what you're doing or passionate doing what you're doing, you don't have breakthrough performance or breakthrough thinking.
If you want to know more about this, you could go to Nugget 14.07 in the Sinha conversation. If you find the content of this podcast purposeful, I would request you to take a minute or two to write a review on iTunes or share with people that you think could benefit from this. The podcast is available on iTunes and other podcast apps like Stitcher and so on. To search for content by specific themes, you could visit the site playtopotential.com and use the search functionality. Now back to the podcast chat with Vedika. And moving forward, Vedika, 2 years at IIM and then maybe picking up the plot at, let's say, the first big transition that a lot of us go through, the placements at IIM, you ended up going down the path of finance and you joined ICICI Bank.
Correct.
Give us a sense of how you thought about it. And again, I'm curious about A, how you thought about it, and B, with the wisdom of hindsight, if you would think about it any differently given where you are today.
Okay. So in the first year itself, when you have to do all the subjects, as you remember, I had started figuring out that finance is what I liked. I liked the numbers. I liked the certainty which goes around with those numbers, the analytics. And so I had sort of made up my mind that second year I was going to specialize in finance. You remember the first job is the summer job, right?
Yep.
And at that time, it's a pre-internet world. So then, you're not exposed to too many things. And so I wasn't. And at that time, Citibank was supposed to be the hottest summer job. And they had the most tough interview process. I think they sort of excelled at making people cry, especially the girls cry. So I said, I have to go through the Citibank interview process, and somehow I made it, though I did cry after my first interview, I think after both the interviews, for the summer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I came here to work in Bombay, and I was miserable. I was just miserable. They had taken lots of interns from all the schools. They didn't have clearly defined jobs for them. I just hated pretty much every minute of it, of my internship. So after the internship, I was clear I was going to do finance, but I wasn't going to apply to Citibank, and I was going to apply to something which was very different from Citibank. At that time, ICICI Limited, by the way, this is before the bank, right? That was the two hot jobs in finance were Citibank and ICICI.
Sure.
And the third day one job was Arthur Andersen.
Right.
And I wasn't so interested in consulting. And so I applied for ICICI because the seniors I'd spoken to, it sounded like a very good place to be in. And I applied and got selected and ended up spending close to 8 years, 3 years with ICICI and 5 years with the joint venture, ISEC. And I enjoyed every one of them. So if I were to look back today, as you asked me to, would I have done anything different in terms of my first job? No, I would not have. ICICI was a small organization. I think there were just a little over 1,000 people. It was a development financial institution. At that time, you will find it hard to believe, but the first time we overtook IDBI was the big daddy. The first time we overtook IDBI was a huge celebration in ICICI.
Sure.
Mr. Vagul was running the organization, and it was just a fantastic place. A lot of us were young. It was a very professional organization, and it gave you great grounding.
Got it. And just sticking to that theme of, let's say, banking as a career path, and I know banking is sort of a pretty wide umbrella, but I'm curious about the campus transition again, because what students hear is often pitches. They don't get the real story.
Correct.
So maybe it would be good for you to reflect a little bit on what are the highs and lows of, let's say, the banking path. And in your head, are there 2 or 3 inflection points where suddenly, people, are having fun, but the playground has shifted and they say, maybe I should do something else. So give us maybe a realistic sense of what that path feels like when you walk down that path.
Okay. So as you said, banking has so many facets to it, right? And the first 3 years I spent in ICICI, which was a lending institution. Right. And so I was doing lending for a certain bunch of sectors. And actually what it helped me was really learn about credit, how to assess credit, how to model, how to assess the viabilities of industries. And that's stayed very important and relevant throughout my career. And then just after 3 years, this joint venture was being set up with JP Morgan, where the whole merchant banking division of ICICI was going to move. And then I got asked this question along with a couple of others who were working in the lending, whether we would also like to move. And it seemed like a great opportunity. Didn't really know anything about merchant banking or investment banking. Didn't know much about JP Morgan also, but decided to make a shift, and I am so glad I did. So I think the first lesson would be ready to take some risks. It's not always going to be really clear as to what will that opportunity entail. It is not going to be clear whether you have all what it takes to be successful in that.
Sure.
But if you don't try, you will never know.
Yep.
And I think that lesson has stayed with me, but sometimes I haven't followed what I've said too. And then after that was investment banking. So from 93 onwards, it was all investment banking. I think in investment banking, there are certainly some inflection points which are important. The first one is where the first time you become a supervisor, right? The first time where you don't know every number in your model. The first time you're not building your own model.
Yep.
It's a very scary time. And that transition is very difficult. Some people make that transition and then move on to do bigger things. Some people just find it so hard to make the transition that they are always the people who are not leveraging themselves.
Got it.
And so who don't do as well. And it's hard because you're worried, am I going to be relevant to my client? If I don't know every cell, what am I going to speak in front of the client? It's harder work. Yep. So that's the first big transition point. I think the second transition point is when you're a director or sometimes even an MD. That's when you're a hunter. So you're looking for business. And the transition point is, it's a cyclical industry, banking. It follows the economy. And there will be dry spells. And how do you handle yourself through those dry spells? How do you pick yourself up when you lose a deal? How do you go for months without getting a transaction done? It's hard. And if you can't handle that, if you can't be tough enough to handle that, then I think, your lack of confidence starts showing up. Yeah. You don't even realize, but you're communicating that to your clients when you're speaking to them. Sure. You're certainly communicating it to your juniors or even your seniors internally. So I think that's the second big transition point. And again, you can either handle it well or you can't. And the third one is you become very senior, you're running businesses. And I think at this stage, you realize it's a lot about managing people. It's a lot about relationships. It's a lot about networks, both internal and external. And if you just say, I'm going to focus on what I do and I'm really good at it and that's going to be enough, I think that's a rude awakening, because I've heard so many people, and, let's be honest, I've gone through these stages where say, oh, but I did such a good job. Why didn't I make it? Because that's
necessary,
unnecessary.
But not sufficient, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
And maybe very quickly reflecting on these inflection points and how you coped with them. The first, running the spreadsheet to monitoring it. Second, dealing with the the cross cycles, and third, relationships. So if you could reflect on just your lessons from your journey, which are worth reflecting upon. Any 2 or 3 themes that come up on these transitions?
So the first one was very hard for me. Remember what I told you about how I grew up? You had to excel, or you were expected to excel at everything you do. The moment you do not own the model, you are relying on somebody else. And so that was very hard for me. I was very lucky to have a really good boss. And this boss sat me down and walked me through this whole journey and said, look, if you micromanage, you're not going to give people who work with you enough space. Yeah. At the same time, if you don't give them clear directions, you're not going to get what you're looking for. And so that conversation and that diagram which he drew me, he was an ex-McKinsey guy, by the way, really helped me. Okay. And it sort of helped me. And I used it every time I had a new supervisor in my team. Okay. So that was really good.
We have a 2x2 for a lot of things.
Exactly. I think the second one, circumstances made me. So when the joint venture broke up, ICICI, and we moved into JP Morgan, a few of us. This was 98. And soon after we got our license was the nuclear test. India did a nuclear test, if you remember. And US US-India relationships were probably the worst. And then the first .com crash happened. So we went through baptism by fire when we set up JP Morgan. And there were many dry months, and we were looking, pounding the streets looking for business. While the JV breakup was amicable, no divorce is finally amicable, right? And ICICI was much better known. They were the big gorilla in the financial sector. JP Morgan was not really known. And so it was tough. But that journey helped me. We went through that once more, many years later in 2000, 2001 too, when JP Morgan was much bigger, but again, the economy had really tanked.
9/11 and stuff, right?
Exactly. Yep. So I think those journeys just help you. It's you have to learn how to take it in your stride, but you keep learning. So in Credit Suisse, much later. Yeah. So this is 2013 or 14 probably. There was one transaction which we had been chasing for a long time. And everybody knew this transaction was going to come. We knew about it. We did everything we thought was right? To win that transaction. Yeah. So got the whole bank behind us, worked on it, was systematic, but did not win it. And that was hard. And till then I used to think that as a leader, you need to not fall to pieces after you lose a transaction, because you have to rally the team around you. But maybe this time I didn't do it well enough, or maybe it showed much more on my face. I don't know. I didn't realize this. Till one day, a young colleague came into my office and said, I want to tell you something. I said, yeah, go ahead. He said, this is the first time I saw how much the loss of this deal had hurt you. Till now, I used to think that you really didn't care if we won or lost. But this time, on your face, I could see it for a couple of weeks that you were hurting. And that has made me feel so good, because I realize now how much you care about this business. And I sat there and I thought, wow, till now I was doing exactly the opposite, but maybe I need to be more authentic because that's what motivates people. So you keep learning.
That's a great insight about also the point about vulnerability, saying, I'm not this all, I've figured out everything kind of leader, but I'm vulnerable too. And
exactly.
Sort of, and be authentic, as you said. Maybe it's a great insight. And just maybe the last piece around this, Vedika, I'm also curious about the false choices people make. Again, in your experience, if you look at the kind of people that join banking for the wrong reasons, but very quickly figure out actually it's not for them. What are the common themes that come up in terms of the misconceptions around banking, which catch people by surprise?
So I think the first thing which people think is investment banking is incredibly glamorous, right? And they think you get to meet all the senior most people in corporate India or corporate US or wherever you're working, and you get to work on the most exciting, most glamorous transactions. It is true. You get to meet really interesting people. You do get to work on the most exciting transactions. But what people don't realize, the grunt, the hard work which goes behind it, right? Yeah. So I used to joke, for every transaction which you see in the newspaper, M&A, there are probably 3 that never make it to the newspapers, or maybe even more, because transactions die, right? And transactions die at all stages. So if you're working on a buy side, your buyer may not win. That's an easy one. Sometimes your transaction might die right at the end because there's no regulatory approval or some other reason, or because the egos couldn't handle it, whatever. And you worked hard on it. You worked for months, sometimes years, but you have nothing to show for it. So I think people don't realize the amount of hard work, the amount of grunt work, the amount of sleepless nights which go into it. The second misconception is, you get to travel so much. Isn't it exciting? Yes and no. Initially, of course, you feel very kicked, but the number of times I've traveled where you go from the airport straight to the hotel, then to the office, and way back. Sure. And so people would ask me, so how's Paris? I don't know. The hotel was nice. And the travel gets to you after some time, right? True. So I think that's the second misconception. I think there's some, not a misconception, but mistakes which people make, right? And I think one mistake which I've seen a lot of people make is talking too much and listening less. I think you make a great banker if you really are able to figure out what's on the client's mind. What is the problem he or she is trying to solve? And more often than not, bankers are so keen, sometimes desperate, to show off what they know, that they keep no time for listening. And I think when you do that, then there's no way you're going to be a good banker.
So Vedika, moving on, maybe picking up the thread at ICICI. Once again, the one thing that ICICI is known for is for having played a key role in creating so many women leaders. As you reflect back on your first 9 years, any themes that come up in terms of what was it about the culture which enabled this to happen?
That's a question which has been asked several times, and it's been debated, as you know. And I've been thinking about it, and I don't think I can come up with a secret sauce, except these few things, and which we took as a matter of course. What were they? So first, there were just a lot of women around in ICICI. So there were a lot of women at my level when I entered, but there were also many senior women. And, there were women with kids, with families, who were working at responsible positions, leadership positions. If you remember Lalita Gupte, there were several of them. So I think that is a very subliminal, it's not a direct, overt message, but it's a pretty powerful message. Second was, it didn't matter what was your gender in terms of getting responsibilities. So which division you worked in, what did you do? It was pretty much gender neutral. And related to that was, how you did with your work. It was recognized, again, irrespective. So if you did a great job, it was recognized. It didn't matter whether you were a woman or a man.
Sure.
The promotion opportunity which you got, it didn't matter whether you're a woman or a man. The opportunity to move. So as I told you, the whole merchant banking division moved to ISEC. But there were 3 of us who used to work in lending who got asked whether we would like to move. 2 were guys and I was the woman. So it was a very almost gender agnostic sort of environment. And this was my first real working environment. So I grew up in that. So I thought this is the norm. Yeah. Yeah.
And the fact that there were a lot of other women, your peers and seniors, was it a part of a conscious effort to hire women, or is it to do with the fact that maybe compared to some of the other sectors, financial services makes it a little easier for companies to attract women into the workforce?
I think probably both. So it's a relatively newer sector to that extent. So if you think about it, TFIs were not that old. These 3 institutions, ICICI, IDB, IFCI, were created for helping the industry. Then investment banking was certainly new. I think that's why finance has probably attracted so many. And in most industries, at entry levels, it's never a problem at the entry levels, right? At the entry levels, you're roughly hiring the same number of men and women in most industries. Not all, but in most. I think over time, how you create opportunities which are as gender agnostic or gender neutral as possible is much more important. And you're right. I think ICICI did have organized, in terms of organizational policies, they were probably way ahead of several of their peers. Yeah.
And again, maybe now to take a more of an individual view as you reflect on your career and clearly the growth on the professional side and in the personal context. Again, any headline themes that you want to leave the listeners with in terms of the mindset with which women should think about their life, which includes both career, work, career, home, and everything else? What are the few themes that have held you in good stead in the journey?
So I think the first thing which really bothers me many times is very often girls seem to make the call that you can either have a good career or you can have a good family life. And I always feel that it's not an either or situation if you want it that way. It's certainly possible to do both. It does mean a lot of hard work. It does mean a lot of networks that you need to build. It does mean a very great partner, spouse, right? But you can do it. And so the first thing which I really get annoyed with is oftentimes girls saying, oh, but I can do only one. So I say, be greedy, aim for both. And it's possible to do both. But then you can't shy away from the hard work. You cannot shy away from, you should not be using that as an excuse. And the second mistake which often girls and women make is trying to do everything yourself, to be the super woman, right, who has the perfect career, who has the best household, who throws the most amazing parties. I think if you try and do everything on your own, you are more likely than not to get burned. So you need to figure out what your priorities are and then just focus on them and build networks. So ask for help. I think many women find it hard to do, but I would say build your networks. Be as systematic about building your networks in your personal life as you are in your professional life, right? So build a network of friends, absolutely lean on your families, build a good network of help at home, but build your networks. Otherwise, it's going to be much harder. It is going to be hard, and you have to be ready for that. And probably 10 years are really, really hard. But after that, it gets easy.
That's an interesting point, because just like you spoke about leverage on the work front, I guess it's a similar theme that can be applied on the other front as well. But sometimes people approach this as a DIY, while they approach on the work front, they think about leverage, right?
I think people are very scared of asking for help on the personal level, I've seen. Either becomes an ego thing, right? I can do it by myself. I don't need help from my parents. I don't need help from my in-laws. Or, how can I leave my kid with a friend or whatever? I think you have to be as thorough and as systematic in building that network as you are in your organization.
And maybe just another piece about the banking career, Vedika, is intensity.
Yeah.
Right. And just any reflections as you think back on now that you've moved on from that career? Not to say what you do is less intense, but clearly banking is known for its intensity like some of the other careers. Any reflections on how you've managed to overcome, let's say, moments of crisis is the wrong term, but let's say those difficult moments that often hit you? Any 2-3 themes that come out?
So it is intense. Banking is intense. It does mean a lot of hours. The good news is, and if I haven't said it so far, I hope you realize it, I'm a big optimist, right? So I always, glass is certainly half full than half empty. So the good news is technology has made life much easier, right? When I started my banking career, there were no emails. Right. There was no internet. So you couldn't easily carry work home, right? But now you can schedule your hours around it. If you have young kids at home, you can certainly try and get back before they go to bed, spend some time with them, and then catch up on your work afterwards. So I think that's the first thing I would say is you need to be thoroughly disciplined. And you need to be almost ruthless in your discipline, right? So there are only these 5 things which I can make time for in my life right now. And these are the only 5 things I'm going to focus on.
Say no to a lot of things.
Say no to a lot of things.
Yep.
Be in the moment. So if you've decided that these are the hours I'm going to spend with my daughter or my son, then you have to be in the moment. You cannot be on the phone or you cannot be checking your email at that time. It's again goes back to the discipline theme.
Yep.
Always tackle the one job which you really don't want to first. And that's hard because I am a big one for to-do lists. And the one which I really don't want to do will continue to be on my to-do list for many days until unless I tackle it up front.
Got it.
And so, my only trick for handling the intensity is to compartmentalize and to be disciplined.
So Vedika, let's talk about some of the transitions you've been through.
Sure.
Clearly, the first one was ICICI Securities to JP Morgan. And then JP Morgan to Credit Suisse. Both were sort of transitions at leadership levels. Again, the first 3 to 6 months often are, make or break phases.
Correct.
Any reflections on those 2 transitions? Once again, wearing the hat of what you went through at that time, but also wearing the hat of having the benefit of hindsight. Saying, what are the things that people often miss out while doing a transition at a senior level?
Sure. So when I moved from ISEC to JP Morgan, I wasn't senior, right? It was back in 98. I had just finished 9 years.
Right.
I hadn't even finished 9 years of working. And so that was a relatively easier one. So I was moving from a joint venture to JP Morgan. And what took me by surprise was while I knew JP Morgan through the joint venture for 5 years, moving away from a joint venture to 100% own, it's such a huge difference, right? Suddenly you're treated differently. There's much more access in terms of knowledge, networks, information. So that was very pleasant and it wasn't a tough transition. The transition was much more in terms of, as I said, going and getting that first piece of business, making sure, we had a viable business. Having said that, in 12 years, which I spent in JP Morgan from 98 to 2010, there were a couple of big transitions, and those were around acquisitions or mergers, which JP Morgan did. And I think the biggest one was in 2001, when JP Morgan got bought by Chase, and Chase had just bought Jardine Fleming before that.
Sure.
And so suddenly we had, and all these three organizations had presence in India. So Chase Manhattan did, Jardine Fleming did, and JP Morgan did. We were all getting together after the merger. The economy was tanking, so there were way too many people. And I was expecting my second kid. So Shamika was born in January of 2001. And so that was probably one of the biggest transitions I went through within JP Morgan, because it was clear that we were too big in terms of team. We had to shrink. And when, honestly, when I was going away on my maternity leave, I didn't know whether I was coming back to a job. And it's a totally different thing, what happened afterwards. But, that was a pretty tough transition. I think the transition from JP Morgan to Credit Suisse, which happened much later when I was much more senior, was also an interesting one. There are things which I think I did well, and there are things which I could have done better. So what did I do well? I didn't have to prove anything when I moved. So, I didn't inflict a lot of pressure on myself. We did set ourselves a goal as a team in Credit Suisse, but there wasn't that constant pressure that I need to prove something. So that made life much easier. Obviously, you have to go and build your network all over again, and which can be exhausting, and especially if you spend so many years in the previous organization where everybody knows you, right? Sure. So you have to start internally. Yeah, externally is not, but internally you have to start all over again, and it can be exhausting, and every organization works differently. It takes you time to figure that out, and it can be sometimes painful, the whole journey, process of discovery. I think also, and here's where I made my mistakes, because Credit Suisse was itself the result of a couple of mergers. The investment bank was more American, because that was First Boston. And, I'd worked in JP Morgan, another American institution. The private bank was very Swiss. And so the two cultures were very different. And I think on hindsight, I did not invest enough time and effort in figuring out the differences and in building networks in both the paths. It is necessary to do that because every organization has a different rhythm. And to anybody who makes a transition at a senior level, I would say, you really need to have an ear and try and figure out what the differences are and invest the time. The first year is your honeymoon period. Every new organization will give you time. Use that time wisely, much more internally than externally.
And are there one or two things that stand out in terms of what one could do in decoding a culture? When you say... again,
I would say ask for help. So, in most places, if you've just joined, and certainly the people who have hired you, it's in their interest also to make sure or to help you succeed. So take their help. Don't try and do everything yourself. I think it comes back to the same thing. When you join, when you transition at a senior level, you think you have a point to prove. And so you try. The risk or often the path you'll follow is, okay, let me do this myself. I need to make a point. But actually, you don't need to do it yourself. The people who have hired you, they're as vested in your success as you are. So I would say take the help.
Interesting.
And you're very scared of taking help because you think it makes you look weak. Actually, it doesn't. It just makes you smarter.
It's a great insight. Counterintuitive that to what we often end up doing.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's interesting that Vedika talks about seeing the world as a problem to be solved and having a misplaced sense of what's solvable in the social impact world. Ravi Venkatesan, who himself has had multiple transitions, Cummins in the US to India, heading Cummins in India to heading Microsoft in India, taking on NED roles such as chairmanship of Bank of Baroda or co-chairmanship at Infosys, and heading social venture partners in India and so on, spoke about the criticality of listening in a new environment.
So from this, you begin to piece together first the situation, and then out of that emerges a theory of change, which is, what interventions are really going to make a difference, and who are going to be the important allies in this. If you don't listen and you come in with a point of view, you start, jumping into action right away, you're going to make a lot of mistakes because you haven't built this nuanced and reasonably accurate picture of the landscape.
If you find this of interest, you might like the Nugget 6.01 with Ravi Venkatesan. If you find this content purposeful, I would request you to take a minute or two to write a review on iTunes or share it with the people that you think could benefit from this. The podcast is available on iTunes and other podcast apps like Stitcher. To search for content by specific themes, you could visit the website playtopotential.com and use the search functionality. Now back to the podcast chat with Vedika. And the other transition I wanted to talk about, Vedika, was this executive to non-executive transition.
Sure.
Again, now I think you said on 6 boards.
Yes,
You're
I
an
am.
Independent director in 6 of them. Again, in your experience, where do people struggle in making that transition? What does it take to transition well from being a successful executive to being an effective board member? And where do you think sometimes people who've been successful as an executive struggle to be as effective as a board member?
I think the biggest difference is when you're an executive, you have responsibility and authority. And, if it's a P&L, you own the P&L, right? Yeah. And so you can make most of the differences. When you are a board member, an independent board member, as I am, you certainly don't have that authority. And so to stay away from that micromanagement, I think it's the hardest thing. Very often, actually, I think the boards struggle with it. So many boards sort of forget that their role is not to run the company on a day-to-day basis. And then they start doing what the CEO is doing or start micromanaging the CEO, which I think is hard. So that is hard when you move from executive to non-exec position. The second is on similar themes. How do you get people to accept or to listen to what you're suggesting when you're not really their direct boss, right? And so how do you get yourself heard and how do you do it?
And how do you influence indirectly?
Exactly.
Without
so
authority,
do you,
right?
It's not a direction you give. It's not how do you influence without having the authority? I think that's the second one. And the third one is every board has its own dynamic between the board, right? And if you're the latest member onto the board, there are already groups within boards or some typical characteristics of the board. How do you figure that out? And in several of the boards, I was the first woman on the board. And so that brings its own dynamic. But I found it fascinating. I tell my husband that this is like the OB classes in IIM. And it's just fascinating to me.
Very interesting. It's like the 12 angry men.
Absolutely.
And a woman. Since you mentioned women getting onto boards, once again, any takeaways on two things, right? One is, let's say, for a woman who's had a successful executive career, who's considering getting onto a few boards, what are the few practical, let's say, thoughts in terms of what they could do? And second is just back to the point about settling in. Any reflections on what are the 2 or 3 things they could think about as they settle into a new board role?
Sure. So I think in terms of getting on to boards, the good news is that there is a law, right? And which means every company does require, and it's not that you get called for a board position only because you're a woman, but that certainly helps. So I would say, put your hand up. Get in touch with the couple of search firms who do these, and many of them do. Your previous firm does that. Spencer Stewart does that. A couple of other firms do that. So put your hand up is the first thing I would say. Second is there are a couple of courses also which are being run. Research that and go in for those courses, because often I think women might not even, the people at the board, men usually, might not even realize that this woman is looking for a board position, or this woman has this background, because she might not be in a very high profile role.
Right.
So you need to make sure, similar to how you would apply for another job, you need to be a little organized about it, and you need to be systematic about it. Some people I found get squeamish about this, and they said, "Oh, if I'm good, I should be noticed." Well, in a perfect world, you should be, but we don't live in a perfect world. So be organized, be systematic.
It's like the third transition you spoke about not just doing good work, but being known for good work and relationships, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And once you get onto a board, then you have to prepare, right? And so I usually go and spend quite a bit of time with the management, just on my own, just listening. Figuring out, hearing about the business, what makes the business work, what doesn't make the business work. Before every board meeting, you should prepare. And for the first few months at the board meetings, just listen. You get much smarter about the business, but you also get much smarter about the board dynamics. And then you can start contributing.
Got it. And Vedika, moving on, back to where we started, water.org. You moved from Credit Suisse, the world of capitalism, to water.org. And as I heard you talk about what you do, clearly it feels like leveraging a lot of those experiences and sort of the financial services wisdom, but maybe applied in a different context.
Sure.
Talk to us a little bit about how this came about. How do you think about that transition from Credit Suisse to doing what you do now?
Sure. So I spent 25 years in banking. Most of it in investment banking, and I enjoyed myself, right? I really enjoyed myself. We were lucky. I did a lot of my banking during the years when India opened up, had a big economic revival. There were lots of, first-time transactions, cross-border, all of that. But even while in my banking days, I was very sure I don't want to, at age 65 or 70, look back on my life and say, what have I done in terms of work? And if the answer is only investment banking, I was very sure that's not going to be enough. And that's not where I want to be. So I knew at some stage I'm going to leave investment banking. I had no idea what I'm going to do afterwards, but I knew at some stage I was going to leave. I started getting bored in banking. I started getting bored because, after the 2008-2009 crisis, it became harder. There was a lot of commoditization happening of banking. It started becoming a race to the bottom in terms of fees. The economy was slower, so it wasn't as if, newer types of transactions were happening. And so I started having this conversation within Credit Suisse saying, hey guys, I'm bored. And, I wanted to leave on good terms. So finally, after my boss, who I'm great friends with, my ex-boss, he convinced me one more year. But finally I left in early 2015. The only thing I was very sure of was I wasn't going to go back into investment banking. There was nothing else I was sure of. And this new law came up, so I took up a few board positions. But that wasn't enough in terms of keeping me engaged on a day-to-day basis. So I started volunteering. And I wanted to work with an organization which worked in the area of intellectual disability. And I found out about this great organization called Jai Vakil. I started volunteering there. And as I was volunteering there, that was quite an awakening for me. So my first fear was, I know nothing about the social sector. What am I going to contribute? The easiest one was I could help them raise funds, which I did. But to my surprise, I found that there were so many things you learn in a corporate world which you don't even realize. It's about processes. It's about analytics. It's about scaling up.
Yeah.
All of that helped me in Jaya Vakil, and I volunteered there for almost a year. And now I sit on their board. And that gave me the confidence, and I started enjoying it so much that I said, okay, maybe my next move is going to be in the social sector. And then I think sometimes it's just providence. So suddenly two things came up. Water.org came up, and the opportunity to set up a foundation came up. And I thought the first time I move into this sector, I want to be close to a cause. So I did not want to join the foundation. And I said, look, I want to be close to a cause. And I did not know about water.org before. But personally, Sandeep and I, my husband and I, in our personal giving, have always been very focused on the woman and the girl child.
Sure.
And what I realized while speaking with water.org and then while reading about them, the absence of water and sanitation impacts a woman and a girl child much more than it does a man or a boy. And, we can talk about safety, all of that, right? What happens when a girl grows up, when she starts menstruating, what happens and all of those things. The positive is also true. So when there is access to water and sanitation, the quality of life improvement is much more for a woman and a girl child than it is for a man. Mm-hmm. And so this, once I understood and how fundamental this is and how it can impact the woman and the girl child, which is anyway a cause very dear to Sandeep and I, that got me attracted to water.org. The opportunity to use my finance background, the people, there are such amazing people in that organization, in this organization, that got me attracted. And then finally, there's this weird symmetry. So I worked for 25 years in investment banking, which is as wholesale as you can get, right? You're talking always billions and millions of dollars. And now I'm working at the other end of the spectrum where the average loan size is less than 10,000 rupees. So there's a very weird symmetry in my mind that, I'm doing both the ends of the spectrum. And that's what made me move.
And you're talking millions and billions of people, right? I think
yes,
it's sort of a scale defined in a different context. Possibly.
Exactly. Yeah.
But maybe just another thought, again, it's a personal question. How have you thought about impact, success and money in this journey? And how's that sort of, again, that's something that's very personal to a lot of us and it varies from case to case. But just any reflections on how those three curves have moved or, anything that you would have done differently as you look back at life?
Sure. So, when anybody has ever asked me, why did I do investment banking for so long? Usually you would expect money to be one of the big reasons. And surprisingly, if I try to put down the 3 reasons or the 5 reasons, money is not going to be one of them. Mm-hmm. And the people who used to work in my team, they used to joke. They said, I hope you don't talk like this to your boss when you're negotiating for us. And the reason is, look, we were all lucky. We grew up in our careers in a time when there was so much happening in India, when it was opening up. The wages, the salaries, the compensation totally changed for all of us. This is not how I was brought up. And so I always felt money was important in terms of fairness. Sure. Okay. So am I getting what's fair in terms of what I do and when compared to other people who do similar work? But the money in absolute terms was actually not a big driver. What was a big driver was, yes, I am a very competitive person. So can we be among the top few banks in the country? So when I left JP Morgan, we were the leader in the country. And when I moved to Credit Suisse, we were like 20 something in the list of banks. And we'd set a goal that in 5 years we should come in top 5. When I left, we were lucky, and luck absolutely has a role to play in success. we were number 3. And I felt that, we had achieved what we had set ourselves to achieve. So what was important to me was, yes, how well do we do as a team? How well do we do as an organization? How many times do we get repeat business? That was very important to me personally.
Sure.
So does the client trust me enough? Do they feel that we added enough value that they will call us back? That was a very, very important milestone for me. But as I told you, I also felt, even in the heydays of banking, that this is not all I want to do. And I also feel that, we were lucky, and we need to, because of that luck, we need to have a phase of life, each one of us, when we give back in whatever way, in whatever shape, right? It could be just writing checks. That's also fine. And I never discount that. But if there is a way, personally, I felt if I could give back and have an impact at a different scale of a different kind, I would really like to do that. And that's where I am.
Got it. And the other point about this transition, Vedika, is a lot of people clearly at some point, as they think about their thought about life and purpose changes, move from the for-profit world to the, let's say, social enterprise world, to use the term loosely. Again, any watch-outs? Again, back to your point about clearly there's a lot of experience that people gain in the for-profit world. What are the watch-outs when they transition to the social world, if you will?
Yeah. I think the first thing I would say is I am sort of amazed at the distrust both sectors have for each other. And I think, as I'm certainly not the first, there are many more people before me who have made this transition, and hopefully there are many more people after me. So I think as this movement continues, I'm hoping that the distrust goes down, right? In the corporate world, there is the belief that not-for-profits have no discipline, no financial discipline, no targets. It's an easy life. In the not-for-profit world, people believe that corporates are all soul-sucking, soulless machines, right? So, and neither of them is true.
It's lack of respect and lack of trust, right?
Exactly. So I think those bridges certainly need to build, and this migration helps in those bridges to be built. I think when you move from the profit world to the not-for-profit world, I think, yes, processes are important, structures are important in the not-for-profit world, but you have to realize, and you have to have the humility of realizing that every problem cannot be solved immediately, and sometimes some problems cannot be solved, period. It's very hard. Personally, from an investment banking environment, every problem had to be solved. You just had to find a solution. You had to be creative. You had to find a solution. You come here, you realize, no. There are problems which cannot be solved instantaneously. There are problems which are so much more complex. And they require so many parts coming together. And that happens at its own pace. So you have to have the humility, you have to have the patience. And that's what I learn every day.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Wrapping up, Vedika, this podcast is titled Play to Potential. It's about individuals staying true to themselves, who they are, and doing the best they can. Any themes in summary as we wrap up this conversation for people to play to their potential?
So I think the big one for me is it's all dependent on us, right? Each one of us, how we can or cannot play to our potential. And a lot of the demons are in our minds. So you asked me a little while ago about women, and while I hate making these generalizations, I'm going to go ahead and make one. I find that very often women are more risk averse. So if a new opportunity comes up, if something which looks different, which is outside your comfort zone, a woman will usually say yes only if she is 80 to 90% sure. A man will usually say yes if he's 25 to 50% sure. And there's been a lot of research. So I would say the first thing, whether you're a man or a woman, don't hesitate to take risks. Everything should not be what you've done before. And everything shouldn't look the same, whether it's taking risk in terms of a new organization, whether it's taking risk in terms of a new sector, or even a new responsibility within an organization. it's a new branch. I don't know, whatever it is. Don't be hesitant to take risks. The second would be just be authentic, be true to yourself, because all of us spend more times at work, more of time waking hours at work than we spend anywhere else. If you try to be somebody who you're not, it's very hard to keep up. So you might as well be, who you are. And you don't have to look exactly the same as the next person working. And, I don't mean a diversity only in a gender sense. I mean it in all types of sense. The way you speak, the way you work, your working style, the way you dress. It's okay. It's okay. And once you get over that, the fear of taking risks and the pressure of trying to be exactly like somebody else, I think then you can play to your potential.
Lovely. Pleasure talking to you, Vedika.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for making your time.
Thanks so much, Deepak. Loved it.
I hope you found the conversation purposeful. If the transition to the social impact world is of interest, you might find the Nugget 6.01 with Ravi Venkatesan relevant. If the topic of women leadership is of interest, you might find the Nuggets with Pramat Sinha of interest, where he talks about how he's trying to make a difference with the Vedika Scholars Program. If you found the podcast of value, I would request you to take a moment or two to go to iTunes and share your comments and offer your review. I look forward to having you at one of the subsequent conversations of the Play to Potential podcast series. Thank you and bye now.